Story 1. I lost custody of my daughter due to my ex's lies. 17 years later, she wrote a best-selling book about her mom's abuse, and now we're reconnecting. I'm 42. I found out my daughter, F17, wrote a book exposing her mom's, F41, neglect. Not sure how to feel. My relationship with my daughter, Sarah, has been a roller coaster over the years. When she was born, I was 25 and her mom, Lisa, was 24. We were young, naive, and definitely not ready to be parents, but life had other plans and we decided to make the best of it. Growing up, I never had a great example of fatherhood. My own dad was in and out of prison, and when he was around, he was either drunk or looking for his next fix. I swore I'd be different. I wanted to be the kind of father I never had, present, loving, and supportive. Lisa came from a wealthy family. Her parents doted on her, giving her everything she ever wanted. Maybe that's why she struggled so much with the realities of parenthood. She wasn't used to putting someone else's needs before her own. When Sarah was born, I was working as a junior copywriter at an advertising firm. The pay was decent, but not enough to support a family in our expensive city, so I picked up a second job waiting tables at night. It was exhausting, but I was determined to provide for my family. In my rare moments of free time, I try to write. I've always dreamed of being an author, spinning tales that could transport readers to different worlds. Lisa would roll her eyes when she caught me scribbling in my notebook, calling it my silly hobby. We had agreed that Lisa would stay home with Sarah. I thought it would be good for both of them. Lisa could bond with our daughter, and Sarah would have a parent's full attention. Looking back, I realize how naive that was. From the start, Lisa seemed uninterested in actually caring for Sarah. She'd leave her crying in her crib for hours, claiming she was sleep training. When I'd come home exhausted from my second job and find Sarah wailing, hungry, and with a soiled diaper, Lisa would shrug and say she must have dozed off. As Sarah grew into a toddler, Lisa's neglect became more apparent. She'd park Sarah in front of the TV all day, using it as a babysitter while she talked on the phone with friends or scrolled through social media. I tried to make up for it by being extra involved when I was home, but I was stretched so thin. Our marriage deteriorated quickly. We fought constantly about Lisa's neglectful parenting. She'd accuse me of being controlling when I'd beg her to engage more with Sarah. She'd throw tantrums, saying I was suffocating her and that she never wanted to be a mother anyway. I suggested therapy, both couples and individual, but Lisa refused. She said there was nothing wrong with her, that I was the problem. I was working so much that I began to believe her. Maybe I was being too demanding. Maybe my own issues from my childhood were making me overreact. Things came to a head when Sarah was about 5. I had taken a day off work to surprise them, thinking we could have a family day. I came home to find the apartment empty, no note, no text, nothing. I was in a panic, calling hospitals and police stations. When Lisa strolled in with Sarah 8 hours later, she acted like nothing was wrong. When I demanded to know where they'd been, she casually mentioned she'd met up with some friends for lunch and shopping. She hadn't bothered to tell me because she didn't think it was a big deal. Sarah looked exhausted and cranky, clearly having been dragged around all day without proper meals or naps. That's when I knew things couldn't continue like this. I started documenting Lisa's neglect, hoping to build a case for custody. But Lisa was always one step ahead. She'd post pictures on social media of her and Sarah baking cookies or doing crafts, things that never actually happened, but created a perfect image of mother-daughter bonding. About a year later, I discovered Lisa was having an affair with a coworker from a part-time job she'd started. Part of me was relieved. This could be my ticket out of our toxic marriage. But another part of me was terrified of what would happen to Sarah if I left. I filed for divorce when Sarah was 7. The custody battle was brutal. Lisa's family had money and connections, and they painted me as an unstable, controlling husband. They claimed I forced Lisa to be a stay-at-home mom against her will and isolated her from friends and family. Lisa's parents testified that they'd seen bruises on her, implying I was physically abusive. In reality, Lisa was clumsy and often bumped into things when she was drunk. Another issue she managed to hide from everyone but me. None of it was true, but the judge bought it. I lost custody and only got visitation every other weekend. I was devastated. How could the system fail Sarah so badly? For years, I tried to maintain a relationship with Sarah despite the limited time, but Lisa poisoned her against me, telling her I was abusive and dangerous. She'd fill Sarah's head with lies, saying I abandoned them and didn't want to be a father. Sarah became cold and distant. It broke my heart. I never stopped fighting for more time with Sarah. I'd send emails to Lisa and her lawyer, begging for extra visits or phone calls. Most went unanswered. When Lisa did reply, it was to accuse me of harassment. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my writing. I'd published a few short stories in literary magazines and was working on a novel. It wasn't much, but it kept me going during the darkest times. I always hoped that one day, when Sarah was older, she'd read my work and understand who I really was. When Sarah was 14, everything changed. Lisa unexpectedly dropped her at my place for a week, saying she was going on a trip with her boyfriend. Sarah was furious about being dumped with me, but over that week, we started to reconnect. At first, Sarah was sullen and withdrawn, but slowly she began to open up. She told me about how Lisa would leave her alone for days to party, how nothing Sarah did was ever good enough, how Lisa would criticize her appearance, her grades, her friends, everything. One night, over a game of Scrabble, Sarah had inherited my love of words. She broke down in tears. She told me how lonely and scared she felt all the time, how she'd thought about running away but had nowhere to go. That's when I finally told Sarah the truth about the divorce and custody battle. She was shocked and angry at first, but things started to click into place for her. All the inconsistencies in Lisa's stories, all the gaps in her childhood memories, it all made sense now. After that week, our relationship slowly improved. Sarah pushed to spend more time with me, though Lisa fought it at every turn. We'd have long phone conversations where I'd help Sarah with her homework or just listen to her talk about her day. I started attending her school events, cheering her on from the sidelines. Fast forward to now. Sarah just turned 17 and moved out of Lisa's house into her own apartment. She's incredibly bright and mature for her age and has been taking college classes. I offered to let her live with me, but she wanted independence. I respect that, even though I worry about her being on her own so young. Last week, Sarah told me she'd written a book. It's a fictional story, but clearly based on her life with Lisa. It portrays the mother character as selfish, neglectful, and emotionally abusive. Sarah showed me the manuscript, and it's heartbreaking but beautifully written. Reading it was like reliving all the pain and frustration of the past 17 years. But it was also incredible to see how Sarah had transformed her trauma into art. Her writing is raw and honest, with a maturity beyond her years. She told me a small publisher is interested in releasing it. I'm blown away by her talent and so proud of her for channeling her pain into art. But I'm also worried about the fallout. The book's foreword makes it clear it's inspired by her real experiences. I know this will devastate Lisa and likely destroy their already strained relationship. Part of me feels like Lisa deserves it after how she's treated Sarah. But I also worry about the drama and stress it will cause for Sarah. I don't know if I should encourage her to publish it or suggest toning it down. I want to support her art and her healing process, but I also want to protect her from potential backlash. Am I wrong for not trying harder to discourage this? Should I stay out of it entirely? I'm really struggling with how to handle this situation. Update 1. Thank you all for the overwhelming support and advice on my original post. A lot has happened since then, so I wanted to give an update. After much reflection, I decided to take the advice of many commenters and not try to influence Sarah's decision about publishing the book. I told her I was proud of her writing and would support whatever she chose to do. Sarah was grateful for my support and decided to move forward with publication. The book came out last month and has gotten a lot of attention, especially on social media. Many readers have connected with the story and shared their own experiences with parental neglect. Sarah's inbox has been flooded with messages from teenagers and young adults thanking her for giving voice to their experiences. As we expected, Lisa is furious. The day after the book's release, she showed up at my house, pounding on the door and screaming that I'd manipulated Sarah into writing lies about her. I remained calm and told her through the door that Sarah wrote the book on her own and that it was fiction inspired by her experiences. Lisa threatened to sue both of us for defamation and destroyed some potted plants on my porch before leaving. I immediately contacted a lawyer friend who assured me Lisa has no case. The book is clearly labeled as fiction, and truth is a defense against defamation anyway. Still, I'm bracing for Lisa to try something. She's always been vindictive when she feels wronged. Sarah has been handling the attention remarkably well. She's done a few interviews where she's spoken eloquently about using writing to process trauma. In one particularly powerful radio interview, she talked about how writing the book helped her understand her own feelings and experiences better. I'm incredibly proud of her poise and maturity. One unexpected development is that Lisa's parents, Sarah's grandparents, reached out to me. This was shocking, as I hadn't heard from them since the divorce. They were key witnesses against me in the custody battle, testifying that they'd seen signs of my abusive behavior. In a long, emotional phone call, they apologized for believing Lisa's lies during the divorce. They admitted they now see how she manipulated everyone. Apparently, they'd confronted Lisa after reading the book, and she'd had a meltdown that opened their eyes to her true nature. They asked if I could help them reconcile with Sarah, who has cut contact with them. I'm deeply conflicted about this. On one hand, I know they love Sarah and were deceived by Lisa. I remember how doting they were when Sarah was a baby, always bringing gifts and offering to babysit. But on the other hand, they played a huge role in me losing custody and Sarah being stuck in a bad situation for years. Their testimony about my supposed abuse was particularly damaging in court. I'm not sure I can ever fully forgive them for that. I told them I'd talk to Sarah but wouldn't pressure her either way. When I broached the subject with Sarah, she was understandably wary. She feels betrayed that they never noticed or intervened in Lisa's neglect all those years. Sarah shared some memories I hadn't known about, times when she tried to tell her grandparents about Lisa's behavior, only to be dismissed or told she was exaggerating. It breaks my heart to think of her reaching out for help and being ignored. I've encouraged Sarah to take time to process her feelings before making any decisions about her grandparents. I suggested she might want to write them a letter expressing her feelings, even if she doesn't send it. Writing has been so cathartic for her. I thought it might help in this situation too. In the meantime, I'm focused on supporting Sarah through this whirlwind and protecting her as best I can from Lisa's anger. I'm consulting with my lawyer about getting a restraining order, as Lisa's behavior is becoming increasingly erratic. Despite the drama, I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. Sarah is thriving in her independence, and her writing career is taking off. She's talking about applying to creative writing programs for college, and I couldn't be more excited for her. Our relationship is stronger than ever. We have dinner together at least once a week, and she often calls me to bounce around ideas for her next writing project. I finally feel like I'm able to be the father I always wanted to be. There's still a long road ahead, especially in dealing with the fallout from Lisa, but for the first time in years, I feel hopeful. Sarah is strong, talented, and resilient. Whatever challenges come our way, I know we'll face them together. Update 2. It's been a few months since my last update, and things have continued to be eventful. I wanted to share some developments. First, the good news. Sarah's book has become a bestseller. It struck a chord with readers around the country, particularly young adults who have experienced similar family dynamics. Sarah's been invited to speak at conferences and schools about her experiences and the power of writing as a healing tool. It's been amazing to see Sarah gain confidence and inspire others. At a recent book signing, a teenage girl burst into tears while talking to Sarah, saying the book made her feel understood for the first time. Watching Sarah comfort her with such empathy and wisdom made me incredibly proud. Now for the complicated stuff. As we feared, Lisa did end up filing a defamation lawsuit against Sarah. She claimed the book was a malicious attempt to ruin her reputation and that all the events described were fabricated. Thankfully, our lawyer's prediction was correct, and the case was quickly dismissed. The judge ruled that the book was clearly labeled as fiction and that Lisa had no grounds for a case. He also warned Lisa about bringing frivolous lawsuits and suggested she seek counseling to deal with her issues. This legal defeat seemed to push Lisa over the edge. She's been harassing Sarah constantly, showing up at her apartment, blowing up her phone, and posting nasty things about her online. We were able to get a restraining order, but Lisa keeps finding ways around it. Last week, she created fake social media accounts to leave negative reviews on Sarah's book and harass her supporters. It's been exhausting trying to stay one step ahead of her tactics. Sarah's grandparents have continued reaching out, begging for a chance to apologize in person. After much consideration, Sarah agreed to meet them, but only with me present. The meeting was tense and emotional. Sarah's grandmother broke down crying almost immediately, saying she was blinded by her love for Lisa and should have seen the truth. Her grandfather, always more stoic, sat silently for a long time before admitting he'd failed Sarah as a protector. They brought photo albums and mementos from Sarah's childhood, which sparked some positive memories. There was a picture of Sarah's 5th birthday party. I hadn't been invited, but it was nice to see Sarah smiling, surrounded by friends and family. Sarah listened to their apologies but made it clear she wasn't ready to forgive them yet. She expressed her hurt and anger at being dismissed when she tried to tell them about Lisa's behavior. Her grandfather, through tears, admitted he thought Sarah was just acting out and regretted not taking her seriously. In the end, Sarah agreed to occasional phone calls to slowly rebuild trust. I'm proud of her for setting boundaries while leaving the door open for possible reconciliation. It's more than I might have done in her position. In a surprise twist, Lisa's younger sister, Sarah's aunt, reached out to us. She said reading the book made her realize she'd witnessed a lot of Lisa's neglectful behavior but didn't know how to intervene. She shared some stories from Sarah's childhood that corroborated the events in the book. Sarah's aunt apologized for not doing more and offered to be a character witness if we ever needed one. She and Sarah have been rebuilding their relationship, bonding over their shared experiences with Lisa's difficult personality. As for me, I'm still adjusting to my new role as father of a famous author. It's surreal to see Sarah's book in stores and overhear people discussing it. I'm trying to respect her privacy while also being there to support her through all of this. Sarah recently asked me to help her write a memoir about our journey to reconciliation. I'm honored but also nervous about dredging up painful memories. We've agreed to take it slow and only share what we're both comfortable with. We've started having writing sessions together, sharing stories and comparing our memories of events. It's been challenging but also healing. There have been tears and laughter as we work through our shared history. Overall, I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. Sarah is thriving in her career and personal growth. Our relationship is stronger than ever. There's still drama with Lisa, but we're learning to handle it as a team. I finally feel like the father I always wanted to be. Update 3. I wanted to provide one final update on this situation, as there have been some major developments. The biggest news is that Lisa has finally agreed to go to rehab. It turns out that a lot of her erratic behavior was fueled by a severe alcohol addiction that she'd hidden for years. Looking back, there were signs I should have recognized: the mood swings, the erratic sleep schedule, the constant headaches that kept her in bed all day. But she was always so good at hiding it, at least from those who weren't living with her. Lisa's rock bottom came when she showed up drunk to one of Sarah's book signings and caused a scene. She stumbled into the bookstore, slurring her words and accusing Sarah of being an ungrateful liar. Security had to escort her out while she screamed obscenities. It was humiliating for everyone involved, but especially for Lisa. When videos of the incident went viral online, Sarah's aunt staged an intervention with the rest of the family. Lisa initially resisted, claiming everyone was ganging up on her. But when faced with the possibility of losing contact with her entire family, she finally agreed to a 90-day inpatient program. She's been there for a month now. Sarah is cautiously hopeful but not getting her expectations up. I've encouraged Sarah to attend Al-Anon meetings for family members of alcoholics. She was hesitant at first, but after a few sessions, she's found it helpful to connect with others who understand what she's been through. It's given her a new perspective on Lisa's behavior, though it doesn't excuse it. In more positive news, Sarah's memoir about our reconciliation was released last week. The response has been overwhelming. So many people have reached out to share similar stories of healing family relationships. It's opened up important conversations about intergenerational trauma and the long-term effects of parental neglect. Writing the book together was an emotional but cathartic process. It forced us to have difficult conversations about the past and our feelings. There were times when we disagreed about how we remembered certain events, which led to some tense moments, but working through those disagreements ultimately brought us closer. One chapter that was particularly difficult to write was about the years immediately following the divorce. I had to confront the fact that there were times I could have fought harder to be in Sarah's life. It was painful to admit my own shortcomings as a father, but Sarah appreciated my honesty. The book also delves into how my own childhood with an absent father affected my parenting. It was hard to be vulnerable about my insecurities and fears, but Sarah said it helped her understand me better. I'm so grateful for the chance to tell my side of the story and to have Sarah truly hear it. Sarah's relationship with her grandparents has slowly improved. She's not ready for a close relationship, but they talk on the phone occasionally. They've started therapy to work through their guilt and learn how to better support Sarah. Last week, they attended one of her book readings and seemed genuinely proud of her accomplishments. As for me, I've started mentoring other fathers who have lost custody of their children. Sharing my experiences and offering support has been incredibly fulfilling. It's helped me process my own journey and turn my pain into something positive. I'm even considering writing a guidebook for fathers navigating the family court system. Sarah is thriving in her career and personal life. She recently started dating someone who seems to treat her well. It's been an adjustment for me, seeing her in an adult relationship, but I'm happy she's found someone supportive. Seeing her happy and confident is the greatest reward I could ask for as a father. There are still challenges ahead, especially when Lisa gets out of rehab. We don't know if she'll maintain her sobriety or how she'll fit into our lives moving forward. Sarah has made it clear that she's open to rebuilding a relationship with Lisa, but only if Lisa continues to work on herself and respects Sarah's boundaries. For now, we're taking it one day at a time. Sarah and I have a standing Sunday dinner date where we catch up on our week and support each other through whatever challenges we're facing. It's become a cherished tradition for both of us. I never could have imagined during those dark years when Sarah was distant and I felt powerless to help her that we'd end up here. Our journey has been painful and complicated, but I'm grateful for where it's led us. Whatever happens next, I know Sarah and I will face it together. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. Parents kicked me out at 16 to make room for my sister's new baby. I posted about their neglect online, and Dad begged when my rich grandparents threatened his inheritance. I, 16F, turned 16 just a week ago. There was no party, no celebration, and my parents barely even wished me happy birthday before kicking me out of their house. The reason? My older sister, Amanda, 22F. She's pretty much my parents' favorite and always has been, for some reason. She's 7 months pregnant right now, and since we have a house with 4 bedrooms, my parents sat me down on the morning of my birthday to inform me that they now wanted me to move to my aunt's house, so the new baby could have my room. My parents have never really cared about me and have always done the bare minimum. But this was shocking even for me. I hardly expected anything from them, and they were still letting me down somehow. They were very serious throughout the conversation, so I didn't think for a second that they might have been joking or that this might have been a pathetic attempt to prank me. After they were done explaining that they needed the new room and that I was apparently old enough to move out, we just sat there in silence for a while. They told me that they would still take care of all my expenses until I turned 18 and make sure I was well fed and looked after, but they just couldn't keep me with them in the same home anymore. I didn't want to argue, but I did ask them why they couldn't just use the guest room for the nursery. They told me, after some hesitation, that they'd used it for Amanda's boyfriend to stay with them. So, to sum it up, my parents had a room of their own. My sister and her boyfriend had a room, and her baby would get its own room. Amanda wasn't at home, and I could tell that this was on purpose so she wouldn't have to watch this happen and feel guilty. My sister and I were never close because of the age gap, but she'd never really been awful to me either. We were civil to one another for the most part. But if she was okay with this arrangement and actually wanted me to leave the house so she could accommodate her new baby and boyfriend, then maybe she wasn't the person I thought she was. I was disappointed, and even more so because it was my birthday, but I didn't say a word to them and just agreed to leave. By now, I've realized that my parents are a lost cause. There's nothing I can say to them to make them love me, and I've accepted that. So, after they told me that they wanted me to move out and live with my aunt, I went up to my room and started packing. They helped me pack, but I think it was just to help me get out quickly. After I was done, they even dropped me at my aunt's house and were very happy talking to me throughout the car ride, but didn't notice that I wasn't responding and was just silently staring out of the window. Once we got there, they dropped me off at the door and didn't even hug me or kiss me before leaving. My aunt welcomed me happily because she actually does enjoy my company, and as far as I know, she loves me more than my own parents do. I talked to her, and after a while, I told her how disappointed I was with what my parents were doing. She was caught off guard when I said that and asked me to repeat what I told her. So I repeated everything that had taken place that morning. Her smile was instantly replaced with a frown. She didn't say anything to me but grabbed her phone, said that she had to make a call, and went to the other room. I didn't hear anything for some time, but then I heard the sound of my aunt fighting on the phone in a high voice. That's rare, because my aunt rarely ever screams at people and she's a really soft-spoken person. So I knew someone must have pissed her off pretty bad for her to lose her temper like this. Then she came back to the room, all red in the face and still looking very annoyed. I learned that it was apparently my parents who had pissed her off so badly. My dad, her brother, had told her that I'd actually suggested this arrangement for the sake of the baby, and that I was completely happy moving out of my childhood home to live with my aunt. This is why she'd been okay with taking me in as well, since she could tell I'd never really been happy living with my parents, and me making a suggestion like that didn't seem too odd to her. When my dad was trying to convince her to take me in, she's a single woman in her late 30s and has no intention of getting married or having kids, so letting me live with her was just like having a roommate for her. And she didn't have to worry about the cost of me living there either, since everything that I needed would be paid for by my dad. My aunt liked me, and she thought that I was the one who wanted to live with her, so she agreed to this arrangement. But now that she knew the truth, she'd called my father up to confront him about it, because what they'd done was messed up and she had to give them a piece of her mind. After the phone call, she was really upset, and so was I, because this was something I don't think any other kid my age goes through often. I'd always known they liked my sister more than me, but this was a little extreme. They'd literally lied to my aunt to cover this up because they knew how insanely horrible this was. They'd literally chosen to give up their guest room for Amanda's boyfriend, who's in his 20s, has a job, and lives in his own apartment. If they wanted to make it work, Amanda could have easily moved in with her boyfriend, but it was at my parents' insistence that she'd been living at home because they wanted to be closer to her, and they were ready to even sacrifice my comfort just to keep her close. I was very hurt, and so I decided to go online and expose my parents for whatever they'd been doing. I didn't know if my aunt would be on board with it or not, so I waited for her to leave the room for a nap, and then I took out my phone, typed out the whole thing, and posted it without thinking. I'd mentioned not only the events of that day itself, but also how my parents have never treated me fairly, and that I've always been considered nothing less than a second-class citizen in my own home. I kind of had a breakdown while typing it all out, and the post was not just me exposing my parents, but it was also kind of emotional. By the time I posted it, I was in tears. I switched off my phone after that for some time because I was scared of the repercussions. An hour or so passed, and I tried to read a book but couldn't focus. Then my aunt woke up, rushed into the living room where I'd been sitting ever since I arrived at her house, and she asked me calmly if I'd posted something. I truthfully told her that I had, and that was it. There was no further discussion about it. So I switched on my phone and then saw that the post had been seen by several people in our family, and I'd received a lot of texts from my parents and even from my sister. In the meantime, a lot of my relatives had commented on the post and expressed how they were on my side. Some of them had even texted me and reached out to tell me that they were always there for me if I needed any help whatsoever. That was uplifting, and I felt better until I went through my parents' messages, all of which were filled with hate and anger. Obviously, they weren't pleased with what I'd done and were demanding that I take the post down. My dad had said a lot of things about me in his texts and even added that he wished I'd never been born, which was hurtful but unsurprising. My mom's texts were along the same lines, and the only ones that were even slightly different were my sister's. She didn't say much but told me that she'd like to speak to me in person if that was possible, and left it at that. I didn't know what to say to any of it and was just very overwhelmed by all the people I had to respond to. So I just kept my phone aside again and didn't say anything to anyone for the next couple of days. But what I did was block my parents because I didn't have any intention of talking to them anymore. I knew they were legally bound to keep sending money for me until I turned 18, and apart from that, I didn't think I had any reason to speak to them anymore. My aunt was also fine with it, and if my dad had tried to contact her in the next few days, she didn't inform me about it, and we pretended nothing had happened at all, which meant that she was on my side and supported whatever I'd done. That was enough for me, and it was all the support I wanted or needed. For the past week, I barely had any contact with my parents, but today they showed up outside my school while I was about to leave, and they looked pissed. My friends were all well aware of the situation between me and my parents, so they accompanied me outside and kind of acted like a human shield around me so I wouldn't have to interact with them if I didn't want to. But they kept yelling out my name and I had to respond. I walked right up to both of them and told them that I didn't want anything to do with them anymore, but they didn't pay any heed to that and told me that I needed to come home with them right away. I didn't understand why all of a sudden they wanted me to return with them when they made it so clear in the past that I was not a priority for them at all, and felt like this was just them trying to redeem their image and reputation among their family members. So I told them that I wasn't going anywhere with them until they told me what was going on, as a way to try and get to know why they were acting like this all of a sudden. On one hand, they looked pissed off, and on the other, they still wanted me to come back home with them. They told me that they didn't want my friends hearing this, so I told them to back off a little so I could speak to them in private. Once my friends were out of earshot, my parents told me that they were here to take me back because I wasn't answering any of their calls or texts, and they needed me to come back so that they'd be able to get their inheritance. They explained that after I'd made that post, pretty much everyone in the family had become aware of the situation, and it had reached my grandparents. My paternal grandparents are quite well off, and they threatened my dad by saying that if they continued to treat me like this, then he'd lose his inheritance. They'd been told that if they didn't try and reconcile with me, treat me better, and make sure I was loved and looked after, then whatever my father and mother were supposed to inherit would end up going to my aunt since she was the one taking care of me, even though she didn't need to, and my dad couldn't afford to lose the inheritance because it was a significant amount of money. My parents had a decent combined income of their own, but I know that had I been in their place, I probably would have also wanted the same thing for myself. The only difference is that I would have had enough brains not to make it seem like I was doing me a favor by saying that they'd take me back, because they weren't doing me a favor. They were doing this for themselves and not for me. And even then, they didn't have the common sense to at least act like they were willing to let me live with them. So I said that I didn't care about whether they got their inheritance or not and walked away without bothering to wait and hear them out, even as they screamed at me to come back. I took the bus back to my aunt's house and told her what had happened at school, and she seemed annoyed as well. To ensure that this doesn't happen again, she's contacted her lawyer so we can do something about my custody. Of course, it's still my parents who still have their rights over me, and that has to be changed if I want to live with my aunt. I also called up and thanked my grandparents for trying to fix this, but I also told them that I really didn't want to go back to living with my parents because now that I'd spent a couple of days living with my aunt, I finally felt like I was free. Living with my parents had been nothing short of suffocating, and I kept hoping that things would change, but they never did. My grandparents didn't live in the same city, so we didn't meet often, but whenever we did at family gatherings or holidays, my parents were always on their best behavior, so they wouldn't know how I was treated at home. It wasn't as if I was treated with cruelty, but it was more like ignorance and avoidance. On the surface, it all seemed fine, but if people spent a couple of days with me at my parents' house, they'd know that they mostly pretended I wasn't even there and cared only about my sister, and after she got pregnant, that just got worse and I was pushed to the sidelines altogether. So I told my grandparents all of this, and they reassured me that if that's what I wanted, to live with my aunt, then they'd make sure that it happened, and if my parents signed away their rights, then they'd make sure everything I needed was paid for by them. I was happy after that conversation because things were finally looking up for me, but it didn't last long since I just received an email from my dad a couple of hours back. It was not hateful or mean, but just disappointing. He said that there was no need for me to post what had happened online and make this so public when the word of what had happened would have reached my grandparents anyway through my aunt. But now, along with my grandparents being mad at them, they also have to deal with a ton of hate from their relatives, and they're being ostracized, which seems unfair. He told me that even some of his coworkers found out about this because the post was public and it had shown up on their feed since he was tagged in it. This wasn't a good look for him at work, and what I'd done had just caused a lot of unnecessary drama in their lives, according to him. So I'd like to clarify for posting about how my parents asked me to leave the house and move in with my aunt on my 16th birthday because my sister was pregnant and they needed my room for the baby. Update 1. So, before I get to what happened, thank you so much, everyone, for bothering to take some time out and comment on my post. Your kind words mean a lot to me, so thank you. Now, to answer some of the questions a lot of you seem to have regarding why I hadn't left my parents' house before this and why I'd waited for them to ask me to leave, especially since my grandparents and aunt seemed willing to help. The reason for that is that I wasn't exactly treated cruelly. Like I already said in the original post, I was never treated badly as such, but I was just ignored and unwanted. That's a sort of mistreatment as well. But for me, I was just glad that I wasn't being beaten or spoken to badly. I still had a roof over my head and food to eat, so I had convinced myself that I was doing just fine and didn't think it was important for me to actually feel loved or anything. I didn't really realize that I was being neglected because it had become so normalized for me. And as for why I didn't approach my family for help, I just didn't want to burden them. I was also worried about what would happen if they refused to help me out and somehow my parents found out. That'd be very bad for me at home since my parents care a lot about appearances and stuff. And that's really why I just kept everything to myself and tried to deal with everything while suffering in silence. My aunt didn't offer to take me in herself because she didn't want to insult my parents, and she wasn't even sure if I'd want to come live with her. So we didn't do this earlier. But now that this is what's happened organically, I guess it all worked out for the best. It happened a little late, but still better late than never. She's in talks with a lawyer right now to get my custody rights transferred to her. And it's going to be a hell of a task to convince my parents to give up their rights since now the inheritance is at stake. But even if this goes to court, I know that my grandparents and aunt will have my back. My aunt's been very apologetic to me ever since I came here because she's realized how neglected I was at my own home and feels bad for never trying to talk to me because she felt like it wasn't her place and letting it continue. At least the air is clear between me and my family now, and I feel a lot better about the future right now. Then there's also my sister. So, in my original post, I'd mentioned that she texted me and told me that she wanted to meet me in person if that was possible, but I didn't know what to say to her, so I ignored that text. She'd never personally been awful to me and had adopted the same behavior that my parents had. She'd just been distant from me for most of my life, but if she had to talk to me, she was generally nice. I thought that the whole idea of kicking me out so her boyfriend and child could live with her and our parents was her idea, so I was upset about that as well since it meant that now she was going to start treating me badly and show her true colors, so I didn't get back to her. We had a weird, tense, and strained relationship, but I still liked her better than my parents since she'd be nice to me whenever we did speak, and it wasn't her fault that my parents liked her more than me. So when, 3 days ago, she texted me again and asked me to visit her, I decided to call her and ask why she wanted to see me. I wasn't going to go back home, which is where I assumed she'd be, but to my surprise, she told me that she was living with her boyfriend at the moment and wasn't feeling well enough to go out. So she was asking me to come to see her, so we could have a discussion about everything going on in the family. She told me that she had a lot of things that she wanted to talk to me about, so out of curiosity, I did go to see her. Once I got there, she first apologized to me for never speaking up for me, even though she knew that our parents were playing favorites and never favored me. They'd always ignored all my achievements to celebrate hers, and I was always the least wanted kid, but she never did anything to remedy that. She just never felt comfortable speaking to our parents about this, so she just let it slide, and since I seemed okay and fine with the treatment I was getting, she felt less inclined to say anything. She'd now realized that it was pretty messed up and wanted things to change, so she apologized to me. She also told me that the living arrangement was something our parents hadn't discussed with her at all, and she'd been shocked to find out about them kicking me out to accommodate the new baby and her boyfriend because she had no idea that this had happened. She'd never even asked for any of this, and her plan had been to just live with our parents until the baby was a few months old, and then she'd move in with her boyfriend. She'd wanted to move out earlier but had stayed only at my parents' insistence. However, after my post, she realized that this couldn't continue and moved out within a week. She'd had a huge fight with our parents over her moving out because they believed that this was a bad decision, and now they weren't even talking because she'd been accused of being ungrateful and selfish, none of which she'd been because she'd never promised my parents anything, and they just assumed things themselves. So all that drama was for nothing ultimately, since my parents ended up losing both their kids. At least she apologized to me for being a bad sister and a bad person in general, which I forgive her for because I don't think choosing to be unforgiving in cold blood is going to help me in any way. We talked things out, and she told me the same thing that my aunt did. That from this point on, she'd be there for me no matter what. So that was nice. It's been a little less than a week since my original post, and I still haven't heard from my parents after the email, so I'm guessing they've given up on trying to get me back. I'm sure my grandparents must have had something to do with it since they did call me in the middle to tell me that my parents wouldn't be bothering me anymore, and that I didn't need to worry about them showing up at my school or emailing me again. I hadn't told them about the email that Dad had sent, so I'm assuming that my parents and grandparents must have talked about things. I don't know what they would have talked about, but I'm sure my parents have given up now. Update 2. Just 3 days have passed since my last update, and today my aunt told me that my parents have agreed to give up their parental rights, and the paperwork and stuff will be complete soon. She'll be taking over the legal aspect of my custody soon, and I have mixed feelings. I'm happy that I'm finally going to have a home where I don't constantly feel unwanted and unneeded, but I'm also kind of empty and sad about some things. I feel weird that this is finally happening, but this is for the best. This is what I wanted. Update 3. Okay. Hey guys, a couple of weeks have passed since my aunt took over. She's my legal guardian now, so yay for that. I also found out that my parents only gave up my custody because after I told my grandparents that I didn't want to go back to living with them, they told my parents that they could either lose their entire inheritance or they could keep 50% of whatever they were going to receive initially and give up my custody and promise not to bother me again in any way. I guess we all know what my parents picked, lol. I'm not surprised, and at this point I don't even care because this just makes me feel like I dodged a bullet there. Good riddance for me. I'm still in touch with my sister, though. My parents are trying to get back on good terms with her before her due date, but she wants some time to herself right now. So she's told them that she wants her space and they need to stop bothering her every day. At this point, I can't help but just laugh at what a pathetic mess they've made of their own family. But whatever. I'm happy with my aunt, and that's all that matters. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My wife's sister aggressively flirts with me and makes a move. Now my wife is devastated, and I'm at a loss on how to help her. My wife's sister made a pass at me at a recent family gathering, and I have no idea what to do. For context, I think my wife, Jenna, is absolutely gorgeous, but she has some really negative body image issues. This is in large part because of her sister, Mary, who is very conventionally attractive as opposed to Jenna's more unconventional, but emo-striking beauty. Mary was a successful model until a couple of years ago and now works in the fashion industry. In our early days of dating, when I would tell Jenna she's beautiful, she would always say, "Just wait until you see my sister." When I did finally meet her family, she would randomly press me for weeks to talk about her sister, whether I thought she was more attractive than her, etc. I always told her the truth, that I think Mary is attractive in a boring way and that I think my wife is much more beautiful and interesting to look at. She wouldn't let it go until I confronted her about how uncomfortable it made me and asked her what was going on. This is when she told me that she always had a chip on her shoulder about her looks because of being compared with her sister growing up. They fell into the classic smart one/pretty one dynamic their whole lives. She also said Mary had a habit of being flirty with all of her exes and warned me that it would happen to me eventually. She then started sobbing and begging me to not cheat on her with her sister, to which I forcefully said I would never cheat on her with anyone, let alone her sister. I've been crazy about my wife since day one, and there's literally no woman on earth who could come close to her. I honestly didn't believe her about the flirting at first. I assumed it was just an extension of her insecurity, but I was wrong. Whenever we get together with my wife's family, Mary always finds ways to touch me and make little innuendo comments about me or my body. It's super uncomfortable for everyone, especially my wife and I. I've called her out on it before. She'll cool it for a while, but eventually start doing it again. It's been 6 years of this, and every time it happens, my wife is upset for days, and I have to do a lot of reassuring. On to the current problem. A few days ago, we were at my in-laws' birthday party, and Mary asked me to help her grab some things from the garage. As soon as we walked into the garage, she turned and pressed me up against the door with her whole body and started trying to kiss me. I immediately pushed her off and asked her what the hell she was doing. She started giggling and saying she was just doing what we both have been thinking and kept insisting, you want to. I told her she was out of her mind and ran out of there. I went straight to my wife and told her we were leaving. The whole ride home, she was asking me what was wrong. I wasn't sure whether to tell her because I knew how much it was going to hurt, but I also thought Mary would probably try to spin it as me making a move on her, so I knew I had to just say it. I told her everything, and she cried the whole way home. For the last several days, Mary has been calling and texting my wife, doing exactly what I thought she would do. Even telling my wife that I said she, Mary, was the hottest girl I've ever seen, which I had to assure my wife a million times that I did not and would never say. Even though she believes my account of the situation, she's been a complete wreck the last several days. She's hardly eating. She pulls away from my touch when I try to hug her or just hold her hand. She says she feels hideous and disgusting, and I don't know what to do. This is the lowest I have ever seen her, and it hurts to see how much she's hurting. I have no idea what to do to help her heal from this. Reddit, what should I do? My in-laws definitely enable her behavior. She's the golden child. They brag about her constantly, even though my wife is literally a neuroscientist. Their mom was a pageant queen, and she was their dad's much younger trophy wife. Honestly, we may have to go no contact with all of them. Update 1. I realized that I have literally never had a chance to check in with myself after these things happen, and I've actually been holding a lot of frustration and resentment about it all. I've been harassed for years, and it has either been brushed off or it's been eclipsed by the impact it has on my wife. I don't blame her for it, but this has been a good lesson in me not burying my feelings for the sake of others, even for her. I also want to clarify a couple of things that came up. Several people asked about how my wife feels about all this, and I explained in a comment that her parents are toxic and treat Mary as the golden child, even though my wife is a freaking neuroscientist, amazingly talented musician, speaks 3 languages fluently and another 2 conversationally. My wife and her family are seriously the only people who don't seem to understand how exceptional she is. I remember meeting one of my wife's family friends and talking to them about her research, and they said, "Oh wow, her parents just told us she works at a university," whereas my parents literally introduce her as the family genius to everyone. It makes me so angry to think about how her family has stolen her shine her whole life. She's literally a Renaissance woman, but all they care about is looks and money. Some folks ask me why I would ever put myself in a situation alone with Mary, given everything she's done. I have no good answers for that other than I never thought she would actually try to do anything. That possibility just didn't exist in my head. I realize now that I should have seen this would happen eventually, and that I should have been less concerned with keeping the peace and more concerned with shutting Mary down before it escalated to this point. Hindsight is 20/20. Anyway, on to the update. The night I posted, I told my wife that if she wanted to try to repair her relationship with her sister, I would respect that, but that I don't feel comfortable being around her for the foreseeable future. I said Mary has obviously been deeply jealous of my wife her whole life because she is a hollow, ugly person whose entire value has an expiration date, while my wife actually has substance. I said that I think her whole family is toxic and has done nothing but put her down her whole life, but that only she can decide whether she still wants them in her life. I also told my wife that while I don't blame her for her emotional reaction, her insecurity is something that she needs to work on for our relationship to be healthy. What Mary did was sexual assault, and she's been sexually harassing me for years, but I have consistently put aside my own feelings about this problem because of how it affects her, and that has prevented me from getting the support that I need. I told her that her reaction only serves to punish herself and me for her sister's behavior, and there's no reason to give her that kind of power. I also told her something that a commenter said that really resonated with me. The only people who have ever considered her second best are her and her family. Everyone else sees her for who she really is. She was crying the whole time and agreed that she needed to go to therapy to work on her insecurity. We were able to find a therapist who specializes in body image/self-esteem issues to work with her individually, and we're looking for a couples therapist, too. My wife sent a message to her parents and sister that explained exactly what happened and told them she would reach out to them if she ever feels ready to repair their relationship. We blocked all of them everywhere, But Mary has, of course, been spamming my family and our friends with nonsense. Claiming I attacked her, I'm a drug addict, I abuse my wife, all kinds of shit that thankfully nobody believes. My wife is still down in the dumps, but I can see that things are getting a little better. She's eating and sleeping more, and she's cuddling with me in the mornings again, which is nice. Now I'm planning a surprise getaway for us this weekend. We're going to one of our favorite places, and I'm going to wine and dine her and try to make her feel like the goddamn queen she is. I want to thank you all again for your help. You really helped me understand the severity of the problem, and again, thanks for helping me connect with my own feelings about all this. Y'all are the best. Oops, the only genius thing I've ever done is marry her. I'm a pretty average dude, TBH, so I have no idea how I snagged her. Sad to think her low self-esteem probably played a part, but I do work hard to be a good husband every day. Update 2. First, I want to say that I've gotten so many questions about who Mary is, and I'm just not going to say. Suffice it to say that she's never been a household name famous, but she made a living solely on modeling for about a decade from what I understand, so she must have been popular enough that fashion people might know her. I really don't know how that whole world works, but emo, it doesn't matter how many names you drop. You're not famous if you don't have a Wikipedia page. Also got lots of comments that mostly jokingly called me a simp, and I can't argue with that. I totally am a simp for my wife. She's the coolest. I hope you all find a love that makes you feel this way. Okay, I think that's it. Here is the actual update. My wife loved the getaway weekend. We had a blast, and by the end of it, she said she felt like herself again. For a few days after we got back, things were really quiet, so we were hopeful that Mary had finally given up, but I felt uneasy about it all. Many of you warned me that Mary would try to interfere with my work, and while I initially dismissed it, I figured I would reach out to my boss just in case. I've been working at the same company for almost 10 years, and she's heard me vent about Mary before, so I didn't have to explain too much. My boss just reassured me that she knows my real character and would let me know if Mary tried anything. As you predicted, Mary did try to contact my boss a couple of days later, and the following is a recounting of what my boss told me. Apparently, Mary said that I needed to be fired because I was a predator and claimed to have proof that I assaulted her. My boss said that was a very serious accusation to make and asked Mary to explain what proof she had. Mary claimed there was a camera that caught the whole incident, and my boss asked her to send the video. Then Mary got flustered and said the police had it, so my boss asked her to send over a copy of the police report. Then Mary said it had a lot of private information in it, so my boss asked her to redact the private information and send it over. Then Mary said she didn't feel comfortable with that, and my boss told her that she could not take action against an employee based on word of mouth from a stranger. Then Mary shouted at her about victim blaming and hung up. Unfortunately, that was not the end of it. Last Wednesday, Mary somehow sent an email from my personal email account with a dick pic, not mine, obviously, to the entire office. My best guess is that I must have left my email logged in on one of my in-laws' devices. She's definitely not smart enough to actually hack me. And I know this is completely beside the point, but of course, she chose the weirdest looking dick I've ever seen. I played team sports all my life. I've seen a lot of dicks, and this was something else. It's honestly kind of funny to think about Mary Googling gross penis or something and sifting through hundreds of images to find just the right one. I had to apologize to everyone on staff, and thankfully, folks were surprisingly understanding. It's actually been kind of a nice bonding experience with my coworkers. I honestly didn't consider myself to be super well liked in the office, but it feels like everyone has been going out of their way to be kind to me, and it means a lot. Anyway, at this point, it was clear we had to escalate things legally. I really wanted to avoid it, but she forced my hand. My wife and I have a lawyer friend who helped us draft a cease and desist letter outlining her continued harassment and the material and emotional damage this is causing us. My wife then sent a message to Mary and my in-laws with a copy of the letter and made it very clear that we would pursue criminal and/or civil proceedings if her harassment continued. My wife's mom then called her crying and begged her to just let it go and leave Mary alone. My wife calmly explained that Mary is the only person responsible for this whole situation and that their parents have always enabled her awful behavior. She also said something she later regretted, but I think was pretty badass. Mary is going to stick you in a nursing home and steal your money the minute she has the chance, and you deserve it. After the way her mom reacted, My wife is firmly settled on cutting off her family completely. This happened on Friday, and on Sunday, Mary's best friend messaged my brother on Facebook to say Mary is going to leave us alone and to please not sue her. I told my brother not to respond, then just sat and enjoyed the idea that Mary was out there somewhere freaking out about the potential of having to actually face the consequences of her actions. It must be such a strange feeling for her. Since then, we haven't heard a peep from the grapevine. It feels like things are finally starting to go back to normal. My wife is starting therapy next week and will be starting couples therapy in a month or two. She wants to do some work on herself first. She's also taking a short leave from work to rest and recharge. I'm so proud of her for standing up for herself with her family and finally putting her mental health and well-being first. Thanks again for everyone who offered advice. This was a messy situation, but it definitely would have been messier without your help. Update 3. This will be a brief update. I don't want to make this a regular thing. The original situation has resolved enough that I am hopeful this will be the end of the saga. Mary and my in-laws have pretty much left us alone. My in-laws still try to contact my wife every now and then, but she's made it clear to her family that if the first words out of their mouths aren't, "I'm sorry," she isn't interested in a conversation. As you can see, the past 6 months have made my wife a badass. She has done some amazing work in therapy, and her confidence is growing all the time. It's not just with her family. She's more comfortable asserting herself at work, with strangers, with friends, etc. She's even stopped putting up with some of my bullshit. To be fair, that's stuff like me leaving my socks everywhere around the house. But I'm seriously proud of her for telling me to cut it out. I'm becoming a more responsible and supportive partner because she's able to communicate her needs and expectations without feeling guilty about it. And I'm able to communicate things to her without intense emotions fully eclipsing the conversation. I didn't mention this in my earlier posts, but my wife does struggle with rejection sensitivity even outside of her family. Often, if I brought up something that I felt needed to change, her emotional reaction, feeling like she did something wrong, would be really intense, and instead of dealing with the problem, it would become about regulating her emotions. Now my wife has really good coping tools that allow her to talk about the problem without thinking she is the problem. And the biggest update, she's pregnant. We have a baby girl due in February. I am flying with excitement. We are going to love her so much and teach her that she is more than her beauty. She's going to have happy parents who love each other and work through issues as a team. The toxic cycle will be broken. Jenna's family doesn't know, and she's not sure when she'll tell them. But if she does, there are going to be strong boundaries in place for how they can be a part of our daughter's life, and it'll start with family therapy. For now, she has one set of grandparents that will go to the end of the earth for her, and that's more than enough. My family has been absolutely incredible in their support, and they're so excited for us. Things are looking better than they ever have. That's all, folks. Thanks again for your support on this wild journey. Hello, everyone. I have come here for advice before, and you were all incredibly helpful, and I could really use some support again. You can check my post history for the full story, but TLDR. Last year, my wife, Jenna, and I had to make the decision to go no contact with her whole family. Her sister, Mary, 30F, sexually assaulted me. In-laws defended her, and after some legal wrangling, they finally left us alone. The situation wrecked my wife's self-esteem and tested our relationship, but we made it through. Jenna and I had our first daughter in February. She's amazing, and we're doing great. We ended up moving away from Jenna's home state, New York, to mine, to be closer to my family, and they've been incredibly helpful with the baby. We have not seen Jenna's family since cutting contact and blocking them everywhere, and we didn't tell them about the baby. Yesterday, we received a letter in the mail from my in-laws. No idea how they got our address. Apparently, my father-in-law has been diagnosed with late-stage cancer and is being told he could be dead in weeks. My in-laws went on about how sorry they were for the way they handled the situation with Mary. They also apologized for the way they've treated my wife her whole life. Again, check post history, but basically Mary was the golden child and Jenna was an afterthought despite being super accomplished. They ended by saying they recently heard about the baby through the grapevine and want to meet their grandchild. To me, the apology seemed genuine. They went into detail on what they did wrong, apologized, and expressed remorse and explained what they should have done differently. They said they hope to earn our forgiveness with time and were willing to do family therapy to heal our relationship. Jenna is not having it. She feels like it's too little too late and doesn't want to respond. She also suspects that they're lying about Phil's cancer and just want to pressure us into reconciliation so they can meet the baby. It seems ludicrous, but I guess I wouldn't put it past them. I want to respect my wife's feelings around this, but I'm worried that if the cancer is real, she may regret not taking this opportunity for reconciliation before he dies. I expressed this to her, but she is adamant, and I haven't broached the topic since. My instinct is to wait a few more days until the shock wears off to talk about it again. I just don't know what the best way to approach it would be. I certainly don't want to force my wife to do anything she doesn't want to do, but I feel like she's not thinking clearly about this right now. It also must be noted that our baby is still struggling with sleep, and we're both tired and emotional all the time, so I feel like this might be influencing how she feels about all this. What should I do here? Should I try again or just let it be? Edit. People, stop being mean to me. I too am tired and emotional, and my feelings are getting hurt. I am not forcing my wife to do anything. I brought it up one time. I know this is not about me. I don't personally care either way. I just want to support my wife. I intend to tell her I am here to listen and talk about it if she wants to, but I fully support her decisions around this. She has a great therapist she trusts, and I'll be here to support her however I can. Oops, to be clear, I will absolutely respect whatever decision she makes. I just feel like the news is so fresh, and we're in such an emotionally complex place as it is, that she may not be thinking clearly about it. A similar situation happened to a friend of mine, and he regretted it for years, actually turned to alcohol pretty hard for a while after. My wife has worked really hard to improve her mental health, and I worry about how the regret might set her back, although I suppose if her family is actually lying and manipulating us, that would set her back too. I just don't know. Would it be terrible to bring it up again in a few days just to see if she feels differently? Edit. I've also thought about asking my parents to take the baby for a couple of days so we can get away and recharge. Maybe just getting my wife in a better headspace would allow her to think things through more carefully and less reactively. I asked her one time and haven't brought it up since. I am not badgering her, and I'm here to figure out how to support my wife in whatever decision she wants to make. And maybe it's not about asking her if she feels differently so much as giving her space to talk about her feelings around it some more. But maybe it's better to let her do that with her therapist first and just let her know I'm here to listen and talk through stuff if she wants to talk about it more. To be 1000% crystal clear, if we never speak to them again, it will be no skin off my back. They're terrible. I just want my wife to be okay. They said they hoped to earn our forgiveness with time. I will give it time and let her lead the way. I hadn't thought about that earn it with time thing. Like, if he actually is about to die, what time are they talking about? And reading from other people that this is a common manipulation tactic makes me feel more strongly that my wife's instinct about them lying is correct. Update 4. Things have taken a disappointing turn, but we have some answers, and we're working through it. First, my wife was right. The cancer story was fake. They were just trying to manipulate us. The same night I wrote my last post, I just let my wife know that I was here to listen if she wanted to talk about any of it, but that I would always support her no matter what she decided. She thanked me and I didn't bring it up again. She had her therapy session and afterward said she wanted to talk. She said she wanted to get more information before making any decisions. She reached out to a trusted mutual connection and asked them to discreetly find out if the cancer was real. They reported back to say my father-in-law appeared healthy. My in-laws are apparently planning a European vacation for August, and they're telling people we are going with them. Shocker. That connection was also able to confirm Mary is supposed to go on this trip along with her new boyfriend. Much older, rich finance guy, shocker. And that my in-laws have not told anyone about what happened with me and Mary last year. They just told people we moved away for work. Obviously, at this point, any possibility of reconciliation was gone. I don't think I've ever seen Jenna angrier than when we found all of this out. Just the utter gall of them lying about something like terminal cancer to manipulate my wife into forgiveness. I'm still amazed they would stoop so low, but it was eye-opening to see comments on my last post talking about how common it is. They even call it Christmas cancer. Some people just have no shame. Jenna decided to write a letter this weekend explaining that she knew they were lying about everything. She told them that they and Mary are essentially already dead to her. She's processed that grief and recommends they do the same. She also said that if they try to reach out again, the next letter they receive will be from a lawyer. She told me that writing the letter was healing for her, so that's one small thing to be grateful for. We were left wondering who told them about the baby and/or gave them our address. I'm sure the address is not hard to find with public records, but we have been so careful about the baby. The connection we reached out to didn't even know about her until Jenna called. We trust them. Just didn't want to take any chances of it getting back. We went over for dinner at my parents' place a couple of days ago, and Jenna started telling them about what happened. I noticed my mother averting eye contact, and my heart sank into my stomach. I asked her if she had been the one to contact them, and she just started bawling, saying she couldn't imagine never knowing her own grandchildren and just wanted us to heal and be a family together. My dad had no idea she had reached out and was shocked and disappointed in her as well. I went absolutely ballistic while Jenna sort of just shut down and got this blank look on her face. I can't remember half of the things I said, but I ended by saying she would now know what it's like to not have access to her granddaughter, just like my in-laws. We took the baby and left right away, ignoring calls and texts from them and eventually my siblings. So now we're both feeling betrayed and heartbroken. Never in a million years did I think my mother would violate our trust like that. We're so close. She loves Jenna and the baby so much. My family knows exactly what happened with the in-laws. She can't claim ignorance, obviously. We're taking a lot of space from them, but funnily enough, Jenna is advocating for us to not be too hasty and cutting them off. She feels like my mom was not acting maliciously and is open to giving her a second chance, especially given she's been nothing but supportive of me/my wife until this. Somewhere down there, I know she's right, but it's too fresh, and I'm still so angry. We've asked for space from my family, and they're being respectful about it. We'll take the weekend to cool down before we figure out next steps together. Thankfully, we have this cute little chubby grub in our house that giggles and makes silly sounds, so it's hard to stay super upset or in your head about anything for too long. I know it's going to be a hard road rebuilding trust with my mom, but I feel somewhat hopeful that things will be okay in the long run. Thanks again for your help. We've let my dad know that he will be welcome to come see the baby on his own, but we want space from everybody for a little while. He understands. Now on to the next story. Story 4. We took in a problem child, a foster teen, and wanted to adopt her. My parents showed their true colors, and now we have a restraining order against them. I 35F never imagined my life would turn out like this. Growing up, I always dreamed of having a big family, but I never considered fostering or adoption. That all changed when I met my husband, Billy, 37M, in college. Billy had been in the foster system himself as a teenager, and he opened my eyes to the need for good foster parents. We got married right after graduation and started trying for kids immediately. It took us a few years, but we were blessed with our son, Sebastian, 14M, and daughter, Mila, 12F. After Mila was born, we struggled with secondary infertility. It was a difficult time for us, filled with failed treatments and dashed hopes. During that period, Billy suggested we look into fostering. At first, I was hesitant. I worried about getting attached to kids only to have them leave, but Billy's passion for helping kids in need won me over. We went through the training and became licensed foster parents 5 years ago. Our first placement was a set of twin boys, just 3 years old. They were only with us for 6 months before being reunited with their mom, but those months changed our lives. Seeing the positive impact we could have on these kids, even in a short time, was incredibly rewarding. Over the next few years, we fostered several more children for varying lengths of time. Some stays were as short as a weekend. Others lasted months. Each child left a mark on our hearts. Sebastian and Mila were amazing through it all, welcoming each child with open arms. Then, about a year ago, we got a call about Annie, 16F. The social worker warned us that Annie was considered a problem child and had been through multiple placements. She had a history of running away and acting out. Many foster families had given up on her. Something about Annie's story tugged at my heart. I couldn't bear the thought of this girl being shuffled around the system with no one to truly care for her. Against the social worker's caution, we agreed to take Annie in. I'll never forget the day Annie arrived. She walked into our house with a scowl on her face, clutching a trash bag that held all her belongings. She wouldn't make eye contact or speak more than one-word answers. The social worker had warned us about Annie's anger issues, but all I saw was a scared, hurt child. The first few months with Annie were incredibly challenging. She would have explosive outbursts, screaming at us and breaking things. She'd lock herself in her room for days, refusing to come out even for meals. We'd leave trays of food outside her door, most of which went untouched. Sebastian and Mila were struggling too. Her behavior was disruptive to the whole household. There were times when Billy and I questioned if we were in over our heads, but every time we considered asking for Annie to be moved, I'd remember the look in her eyes that first day. That mix of fear and defiance that screamed, "I dare you to prove me right and give up on me too." So we persevered. We weathered the storms of Annie's anger, always trying to respond with patience and love, even when it was hard. Slowly, so slowly we almost didn't notice at first, things began to change. It started with small things. Annie would emerge from her room for family movie nights, though she'd sit apart from us. She stopped slamming doors quite so often. One day, I heard her laugh at one of Sebastian's corny jokes. The real turning point came about 6 months after Annie arrived. I was up late one night, unable to sleep. I heard a noise from the kitchen and went to investigate, finding Annie surrounded by broken glass. She had been trying to sneak a midnight snack and dropped a plate. When Annie saw me, she flinched back, clearly expecting to be yelled at or punished. Instead, I just asked if she was hurt and started cleaning up the glass. Annie stood frozen for a moment, then quietly began to help. As we cleaned, she started to cry. Through her tears, Annie told me about her past. How her birth parents had abused and neglected her. How previous foster families had treated her like a burden or a paycheck. How she had learned to push people away before they could hurt her. We stayed up talking for hours that night. By the time the sun rose, something had shifted between us. It was like Annie finally realized we weren't going to give up on her, no matter what. From that point on, Annie's transformation was remarkable. She started engaging more with the family, joining us for meals and activities. Her grades improved as she actually started attending classes and doing homework. She even joined the school volleyball team. There are still difficult days, of course. Annie's past trauma doesn't just disappear, but now when she's struggling, she comes to us instead of shutting down. She's formed a special bond with Sebastian, often helping him with his homework or defending him from bullies at school. Mila looks up to Annie like the cool big sister she always wanted. Seeing Annie blossom and watching our family grow closer has been amazing. A few months ago, Billy and I started seriously discussing adoption. We want to give Annie the forever family she deserves. When we brought it up with Sebastian and Mila, they were thrilled at the idea of making Annie officially their sister. We decided to discuss our plans with our extended family before talking to Annie. We wanted to make sure she would be fully welcomed into the family. Most of our relatives were supportive, especially Billy's siblings, who had seen firsthand the positive changes in Annie. However, my parents' reaction was deeply upsetting. When we told them we wanted to adopt Annie, my mom, 60F, asked if we were sure about taking on damaged goods. I was shocked, speechless. Annie may have had a difficult past, but she's not damaged. She's a wonderful, resilient girl who deserves a loving family. My dad, 62M, was even worse. He ranted about how Annie would ruin the family name and asked what people would think. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These were my parents, the people who had raised me to be compassionate and caring. How could they be so cruel about an innocent child? I've always had a somewhat strained relationship with my parents. They're very traditional and have never quite approved of our decision to foster, but this felt like a whole new level of awfulness. Billy and I shut down the conversation and left, both of us furious and heartbroken. Now I'm at a loss for what to do. We haven't told Annie about our plans to adopt her yet. We want to make it special when we do ask her, but I'm worried about how my parents will treat her if we go through with the adoption. I don't want Annie to face rejection from people who are supposed to be her grandparents. Part of me wants to cut my parents off completely to protect Annie, but I'm worried about causing drama that could impact the adoption process. I also don't want to deprive Sebastian and Mila of a relationship with their grandparents. Even though my parents' behavior has been awful, I'm torn between my desire to protect Annie and my reluctance to blow up my entire family. Should I confront my parents about their cruel comments, try to educate them about Annie's past and the realities of foster care, or just distance ourselves and hope they come around eventually? I know Annie deserves a family that will love and support her unconditionally. Billy, the kids, and I are ready to be that family. I just wish my parents could see what a wonderful person Annie is instead of focusing on her past. Any advice on how to handle this situation would be greatly appreciated. Date 1. It's been about a month since my last post, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments and advice. It really helped me gain perspective on the situation with my parents and Annie. After much discussion with Billy, we decided to confront my parents about their comments regarding Annie, and we invited them over for dinner without the kids present. I spent days preparing what I wanted to say, trying to find the right words to make them understand. When they arrived, things were tense from the start. My mom brought a casserole, acting as if nothing was wrong. My dad barely grunted a hello. We managed to get through dinner with stilted small talk, but as soon as the plates were cleared, I knew it was time. I took a deep breath and told them plainly how hurtful and unacceptable their words about Annie had been. I explained that Annie is a part of our family now, and if they can't treat her with love and respect, they won't be welcome in our lives. My mom tried to backpedal, claiming she was just concerned about us taking on such a big responsibility. She went on about how teenagers are difficult even without trauma, and how she was worried we were in over our heads. I reminded her of all the challenges we'd already overcome with Annie, how much progress she'd made. I told her about Annie making honor roll, about her talent for art, about the way she looks out for Sebastian and Mila. I hoped that hearing about the real Annie, not just their preconceived notions, might change their minds. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in my mom's eyes, but then my dad spoke up, and any hope I had vanished. He doubled down on his previous statements, saying some truly vile things about her background and how she would corrupt Sebastian and Mila. I've never seen Billy so angry. His own experiences in foster care made my dad's words especially hurtful. Billy told my dad, in no uncertain terms, that he needed to leave our house and not come back until he could treat our daughter with respect. My parents left in a huff, my mom crying and my dad red-faced with anger. After they were gone, Billy and I had a long, emotional discussion. We decided that, for Annie's safety and well-being, we needed to go low contact with my parents for now. We're not cutting them off completely, but we're limiting interactions, and they won't be allowed unsupervised time with any of the kids. It was a difficult decision, especially knowing how it might affect Sebastian and Mila's relationship with their grandparents, but Annie has to be our priority. She's been hurt by too many adults in her life already. We won't let her be hurt by people who are supposed to love her. On a happier note, we finally asked Annie if she wanted us to adopt her. We took her out for a special dinner, just the three of us. We went to this little Italian place where we had taken her for her birthday a few months ago. Annie had mentioned it was the first time she'd ever been to a real restaurant. When the waiter brought out dessert, we had them write, "Will you be our daughter?" in chocolate sauce on the plate. When Annie saw it, she froze for a moment, her eyes wide, then she burst into tears. For a terrifying second, I thought we had made a mistake. But then Annie launched herself across the table, hugging us both and saying yes over and over. She told us she had been hoping we'd ask but was afraid to bring it up herself, worried that she was just a temporary part of our lives, like with every other family. It was such an emotional moment for all of us. Billy and I reassured Annie that she didn't need to thank us. We're the lucky ones to have her in our lives. We told her how much we love her and how proud we are to call her our daughter. When we got home and told Sebastian and Mila that Annie had said yes, they were over the moon. They've been calling her their sister from day one, but now it's going to be official. Sebastian immediately started planning a welcome to the family officially party, while Mila asked if Annie could help her redecorate her room to be more a big girl, like Annie's. The next day, we had a family meeting to discuss the situation with my parents. We explained in age-appropriate terms that Grandma and Grandpa had said some unkind things, so we wouldn't be seeing them as much for a while. The kids were understandably confused and upset. Annie blamed herself at first, saying maybe it would be better if she left so we didn't have problems with my parents. It broke my heart to hear her say that. We reassured her over and over that it wasn't her fault at all, that we chose her and we choose her every time. Sebastian surprised us all by saying that if Grandma and Grandpa couldn't accept Annie, he didn't want to see them either. Mila agreed, saying Annie was her sister no matter what anyone said. Billy and I were so proud of their loyalty and love for their sister. We told them they could still have a relationship with their grandparents if they wanted, but they insisted they were Team Annie all the way. We're starting the official adoption process now, and hope to finalize everything within the next 6 months. There's a lot of paperwork and home visits ahead, but knowing that at the end of it, Annie will legally be our daughter makes it all worthwhile. As for extended family, my sister, Kate, 33F, has been incredibly supportive. When I told her what happened with our parents, she was furious on our behalf. Kate has really stepped up as a fun aunt figure for Annie. She takes all 3 kids out for cousin days and makes sure Annie feels included. There have been some bumps in the road as we navigate this new family dynamic. Annie still has days where she struggles with her past trauma, but she's opening up to us more and more. Last week, she came to me in tears after a nightmare. It broke my heart to hear some of what she's been through, but I'm glad she feels safe enough now to share with us. We're taking things one day at a time, focusing on building our family bond. The adoption process is moving forward, and we're cautiously optimistic. I'll update again when we have more news. Thank you all again for your support and advice during this challenging but rewarding time. Update 2. It's been about 3 months since my last update. The adoption process is moving along, though not as quickly as we'd hoped. There's been a lot of paperwork and home visits. Annie has been a trooper through it all, but I can tell the uncertainty is wearing on her. We've had some issues with my parents trying to force contact. They've shown up unannounced at our house a few times. The first time, Annie had a panic attack. She was convinced we were going to send her away. It took hours to calm her down and reassure her that she's not going anywhere. After that incident, Billy and I decided to get a restraining order against my parents. It was a hard decision, but Annie's well-being has to come first. The day we went to court for the restraining order was tough. Seeing my parents there, my mom crying and my dad glaring at us, brought up a lot of complicated emotions, but then I remembered how terrified Annie had been, and I knew we were doing the right thing. The kids were upset at first when we explained about the restraining order, especially Mila. She's always been close to my mom and had a hard time understanding why she couldn't see her grandmother. We've been trying to arrange for the kids to have phone calls with my parents, supervised by us, but it's been challenging. On a more positive note, Annie has really been thriving lately. Her grades have continued to improve, and she made the honor roll this term. Her art teacher told us Annie has real talent and suggested we look into summer art programs for her. Annie was over the moon when we signed her up for a local art camp. Sebastian and Annie have gotten especially close. He's been having some trouble with bullies at school, and Annie has become fiercely protective of her little brother. Last week, she marched right up to the main bully and read him the riot act. The principal called us in, but once we explained the situation, Annie didn't get in any trouble. I was so proud of her for standing up for Sebastian. Mila has been struggling a bit with all the changes. She's always been our baby, and I think she's feeling a bit left out with all the focus on Annie lately. Billy and I have been making an effort to have special one-on-one time with each of the kids to make sure no one feels neglected. Last weekend, I took Mila for a girls' day of shopping and ice cream. It was nice to spend some quality time with her. We had a scary moment last month when Annie got really sick with pneumonia. She had to be hospitalized for a few days. The social worker warned us that this could potentially delay the adoption process, but thankfully everything seems to be back on track now. While Annie was in the hospital, my mom tried to visit. The nurses thankfully stopped her, but Annie was really shaken up. It led to her finally opening up to us about some of the abuse she suffered in previous foster homes. She told us about one family that would lock her in a closet for days as punishment. Another would withhold food if she didn't do her chores perfectly. It was heartbreaking to hear, but I'm glad she felt safe enough to share with us. After Annie was released from the hospital, we had a family movie night. As we all cuddled on the couch watching Annie's favorite film, I looked around at my family. Sebastian was explaining some plot point to Mila, who was half asleep on Billy's shoulder. Annie was curled up next to me, laughing at the movie. In that moment, despite all the challenges we faced, I felt so incredibly grateful for this life we've built. We're continuing to take things day by day. There are still challenges, but seeing how our family has come together to support each other makes it all worth it. Annie calls us Mom and Dad now, which never fails to make me tear up. We're hoping to have good news about finalizing the adoption soon. Update 3. I can't believe it's been 6 months since my last update. So much has happened, I hardly know where to begin. The biggest news is that Annie's adoption is finally official. We had the court hearing last week, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room when the judge declared us a forever family. The day of the hearing was a whirlwind of emotions. Annie was so nervous that morning. She could barely eat breakfast. As we drove to the courthouse, she kept fidgeting with her new dress, a gift from Aunt Kate for the occasion. Billy held her hand the whole time we waited for our case to be called. When the judge asked Annie if she wanted to be adopted by us, her voice was shaky but clear as she said yes. More than anything, I couldn't hold back my tears as the judge signed the papers and announced that Annie was officially our daughter. We all hugged right there in the courtroom, even Sebastian, who usually thinks he's too cool for public displays of affection. We threw a big party to celebrate. All our friends and supportive family members came. Our house was packed with people who wanted to congratulate Annie and welcome her to the family. Annie was beaming the whole time, going from person to person, thanking them for coming. She gave a little speech, thanking us for giving her a home and a family. I don't think I've ever been so proud. The party wasn't without drama, though. My parents tried to crash despite the restraining order. Billy's brother, Mike, 40M, saw them coming and managed to head them off before they could cause a scene. We're so grateful for how protective our family has been of Annie. Mila and Sebastian have really stepped up as big brother and little sister. They've been so patient on the days when Annie struggles. Last month, Annie had a major meltdown on the anniversary of a traumatic event from her past. Sebastian and Mila just sat with her, not saying anything, just being there. It meant the world to her. We've had some growing pains as we adjust to being a family of 5. Annie is still working through some of her past trauma. She has nightmares sometimes and struggles with trusting that we won't abandon her, but she's making progress every day. Annie's art has really taken off. Her paintings were featured in a local student art show, and one even sold. She was so excited to earn her own money from something she created. We're looking into more advanced art classes for her. Sebastian had his first school dance last week. Annie helped him pick out an outfit and gave him advice on talking to his crush. It was so sweet to see them bonding over typical teenage stuff. Mila has discovered a passion for soccer. Annie and Sebastian have been great about attending her games and cheering her on. Seeing all 3 kids support each other in their various activities has been amazing. We still haven't heard from my parents since the failed attempt to crash the adoption party. It's been hard, especially around holidays, but we're focusing on the family we've chosen. Billy's siblings and my sister, Kate, have been wonderful, making sure the kids don't feel like they're missing out on extended family. There are still challenges ahead, I'm sure, but watching Annie blossom into a confident, happy teenager has been the most rewarding experience of my life. Billy and I are tired but happier than ever. We're so glad that we took a chance on fostering and ended up with such an amazing addition to our family. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My fiancée admitted she cheated on me with multiple partners, got pregnant, and doesn't know who the father is. Important note. Watch out. This is a long one. My fiancée cheated and got pregnant the month after I found out. So much in the aftermath. Thoughts, doubts, and tension are staying with me. I am seeking advice on how to proceed. Feedback, comments, and enlightenments are welcome. 2. Background would fill pages. Just in short, we have been in a long-distance relationship, LDR, with plans to eventually live together. We called daily and messaged intensively, 50 messages a day, mostly much more. About every 2 months, we would stay together for some 2 to 3 weeks. Our LDR spanned borders. We are from different countries and cultures, a few thousand kilometers apart. So we stayed together again. She picked me up at the airport. Happy times being together, going out, solving things, buying stuff, meeting friends. We had sex again. But this time it felt different. Small details, looks, words, hand-in-hand play, and a detail here and there raised my suspicions. We had many memorable moments together. Later, some more details. Let me jump to her confession. I flew off into the distance again. 5 weeks into the pregnancy. And at another anger eruption, I finally had the balls to chat, reply, and trigger her with one specific but fuzzy clue from my collection of gut feelings and semi-evidence. A visual trigger, harmless to look at, but an overwhelming trigger for a caught liar. It was a hit. Bullseye. She got silent, stunned, like collapsing. Only a few words she replied, admitting it. It was clear the game was over. The house of lies was collapsing, and finally it was getting off my chest. I arranged with a colleague that I wouldn't be able to work much that day. What followed was a 3-hour call with her. She repeated from the last lines of our chat, "My tears are dry. You can tell me everything now." What followed was her confession. Who she slept with when they first met, how many times they met during that month, the month before I arrived, that they did not use protection. Oh, she excused herself, but he said he would come outside. No comment needed, right? Either way, years earlier, she gave me an STI from another fling. That time, we hadn't been that close or committed. She had 4 affairs I know of and never used protection. Or so it seems. That time we had the STI, I had been on her side, opened and educated her about it and where it came from, took the walk of blame to get the medication and supplied it to her, too. That time, she couldn't conceive for several months for the same reason. However, some very small inaccuracies were included. The date of their first cheat date and, when asked about her ex, another fling or ex who was current a year ago, she denied having seen him. I suspected she and he met at a New Year's Eve party. Social media. Both posted from the same location, and the photos have been taken from the same angle of the site. No coincidence. You were not there by coincidence. Well, he was clever to use a story photo only visible for 24 hours. Coincidence filled the gap. All of my gut feelings, perceived through my senses, were right. One sentence out of the mindset of a cheater, but he's not a good person. He only wanted to F. Still, a caught cheater tries to push it to others. I didn't reply to that. Not worth it. One more. I didn't want to meet him again, but he came to my room days later, again without invitation, without appointment. What a naughty boy. Guess who first opened the door and then the legs? One final more. We only make love, then it would be okay, or what was that for? I heard it, noted it, but not a word replied from me. No protection. I told him, no, my husband will be coming, and again they met. But her lover/AP always said to me, don't need to worry about whatever consequences. Getting busted, risk of our breakup. Also, when he attempted to meet again after I left, she worried that I would leave her and we would break up. I mostly listened to her confession and just asked very small questions. But on this one, I couldn't hold it and replied very calmly and non-offensive, you don't need to worry about me leaving you. I left you already the day you escorted me to the airport, so they had sex in our room, on our bed, on the same bedsheet. Our studio photo of us, arranged together, was next to the bed. She ordered a surprise gift for me in his presence. She and he ate from the plates we had hand-selected, shopped for. He saw a tattoo on her bare body dedicated to our future children. We did that tattoo 3 months prior as a commitment to our relationship. She demanded to get that tattoo, mostly spontaneous, while passing a studio. I negotiated it down a bit for size, being more discreet and a shorter inscription, yes, text. What could I do? What could I have done? What should I do? Well, we have been engaged, but all that went down the hill, ruined and tainted during and due to her cheating. It is and was not in my control. Her choice and her actions and consequences are up to her, right? And the distance was another barrier. Still not sure if for good or worse. I had horrible and thoughtful days and nights, being non-concentrated at work. Felt good about some lies got out of the secret, but felt bitter and bad about our relationship falling apart and one dream vanishing after the other. We kept in contact. Felt bizarre and strange. Less messages and calls. I couldn't say I love you anymore to her. Avoided the usual confessions. Her tensions rising, I could again feel her inner tension, either because of her inner conflict, who's the father, how to continue, or due to her meeting the other man again. My gut feeling told me this time I was listening and trusting my gut feeling better. Her strange behavior had the same pattern as during the ongoing month. She told him the day before I arrived to forget her like he never knew her, then blocked and deleted evidence. 10 days later, in the limbo of fog and status quo, there was a morning surprise, and what followed shortly after was another new anger eruption, swearing at me. It came clear to me that there is no future for both of us. Just toxic, tainted lies, doubt, tension, no trust, no faith, no hope, possibly new betrayal and lies. That morning, she changed a profile photo halfway. Clever. It was not showing her with that other male together, but a photo he took of her on the day they met first. That way, she could show it openly to everyone, to me, and to her pleased lover, because the photo itself looks good, normal, and innocent. Looks can be deceiving. Later, someone enlightened me about her previous profile photos, same pattern, giving me the names matching each of her profile and story photos in a way like playing concentration, the memory card game where you find a matching pair. I traveled back in time and discovered some unseen posts by her, some that have been visible for only a few hours, and the time she changed her relationship status from engaged to single, kicking my own crap, what I have missed so obviously, some so openly. I had help. Someone is a translator, that someone is way more active on social media and took screenshots at the time of the posts because that someone found it strange. The bottom line. Today, I am not going to sleep alone, together with a photo of her dressed nicely just before going out on the date with him. It was visible only quite short, an hour or two. What's happening in the mind of someone posting such an announcement to cheat? Who was that addressed to? Anticipation for the lover on what to expect when they meet later on that day. Thrill of announcing it publicly? I learned about this announcement in hindsight. At the original time of that post, I was sleeping. Still risky. At that time, I was very emotional, mixed, and many thoughts went through my mind. Thinking ways, thinking possibilities. Almost couldn't work. Consulted SLS. Spoke with a close friend about it. Overthinking and overthinking again. I found no good ending, no good outcome, no good way, just that an end is necessary for that toxic relationship. An end for being sold for stupid. An end for being taken for a ride. An end to lies. An end to history repeating. An end to our misery. And an end to my illusion about our having a committed, exclusive relationship. And an end to our future would be a family with her. A fight is going on inside me. Google it with quotes for another insight, how to end. I skipped most ideas floating in my mind about how to put an end, how to cause least pain, how to not be mean, short time and long time outcome, how to put her / them not to life danger. She twice threatened to jump as an escape, or was it her call for attention in case of borderline? Why ghosting? No additional hurt, no extra argument, no more conflict. It will hurt us both enough anyway. My intention was avoidance. To avoid that awkward situation, avoid losing face, avoid a screaming match, avoid new lies, avoid her apologizing with no chance for forgiveness, avoid new promises to be broken again, avoid her begging, and avoid me needing to hear all this again. Heard that before. She didn't keep promises before. I needed an end to both her plus my tensions and her toxicity, and I wanted to protect myself from being hurt that deep again. On confession day, I thought and expected the end to our relationship, but somehow it was not really over and transferred to a daily routine. Wake up to myself, our relationship was over long ago. I also wanted to avoid the small risk of me getting soft, avoiding history repeating. One time in the past, in a broad similar situation where she did something contra relationship, and I wanted to break up, she slapped herself several times as self-punishment while begging to forgive her, and another time she bit herself to underscore her promises for her virtue and honesty. I also didn't want to risk her jumping to death after a full rejection. Who ghosts first? In the past, she once threatened to ghost me, block, delete, and change her number, etc., even to move so you will not find me. I remember all the details. She barked very late that night, in addition to our usual goodnight call. During that day, there has not been much to argue about, but it erupted from her. It sounded like an announcement. In 2 weeks, her future plan. That was 2 weeks before she started her affair and met her lover the day following that announcement. I was not answering her for half the day. She played down what she said, apologizing, emphasizing how much she loves me and how much our relationship values her. Made me think that time. I forgave. I selected to ghost, avoiding discussions worthless, avoiding confrontation with tears, avoiding new lies. By the way, one of her confessions was, I am a liar. I set a fixed day some days in the future to pull out the plug time to become aware which plugs are there. All those social media connections, messengers, mutual friends, phone numbers, office. I read many threads about surviving infidelity, about breakups, about revenge, learning from others' experiences, trying at least. I realized nobody and no guide would take it from my shoulders. More doubt, more overthinking, trying to think ahead into the far future. Revenge? Well, I thought about it a lot. I had the feeling for it. I hate both of them for what they did. I read a lot about revenge and payback, also about the experience others have had and their outcome. Short time. Feels good to revenge. Long time. Mostly not worth it, and many have had a little evil eating them. And that then ex-mutual friends, family, and karma might look down on me because of the revenge I did. Still, thoughts are circling from time to time about dropping a line or a fist to that AP. He actively took part in the actions that turned the lives of 3 to 4 people into unknown worse. Suggestions are welcome. Reputative revenge. I thought about revealing to her best friend and her sister about her infidelity and lies and everything, so they wouldn't think bad of me and I keep a good reputation. Revenge would have made me feel good for a moment because I was right and she was wrong, and opening the book of shame and blame. But they are her friends and family. They would either be on her side or blame her for her actions from all sides, plus gossip. No, in no scenario they wouldn't be part of my future anyway. To myself, let it go. So I decided to let it go, let her go, and continue her life and tell her friends, relatives, family, and the other guy, lover/AP. Whatever story she wants or is most comfortable for her. Her future. A view to the other side. How would she and her life continue? I don't know, and it was not my business and out of my control anyway. However, whatever I give in or say to her might take effect in the far future, her future, their future. She would offend and justify her actions or change the story so she would have more tension about it and the new lies she would tell them. So whatever, give her a bit more freedom to tell them whatever she wants, whatever makes her comfortable, whatever is good for her future or the next guy. Would it hurt me first? I thought yes, because of my reputation and gossip, but then I settled with no. It would not hurt me. So let her create her own reality, and I don't mix in there. But also, I would not be available to blame me on anything anymore. Her actions, her consequences, you reap what you sow. Except a big but. What if I am the father and that little new person comes of age and asks questions about who his father is, where, why not there, and what else happened? My thoughts are still hurting me on this ongoing, but the answer is similar like before. Her and their way of life would be complicated enough. No input for me and thus no consideration needed. They will have a story ready, and children eat it as it is until maybe in the far, far future. I am not prepared for that case. Someone in 15 or 20 or 25 years knocks my door and says hi and maybe confronts me about whatever version of the story. History cannot control that too. I might have years to prepare for that and years of headache about and thoughts. I realized I don't want revenge. Put nothing bitter nor angry. Last best wishes have been said and written already on previous escalations. Like heartfelt goodbye and thanks for knowing you and all the good time we spent together. Wishing you well and take care. Last time, on that 10-day, I didn't feel to repeat it like that. Another time, on previous occasions, every few months, she texted me goodbye forever, this time for real, but they weren't actually an end, and usually minutes to 2 hours later she calmed down and apologized lovely. The end or becoming a ghost. The last afternoon came. The last time I sent out nice and amicable words on the phone call with a lump in my throat because I knew it was the end. I was tempted to say something else. Maybe something important or something lasting or something meaningful. I resisted it. Hurt later and late last messages sending out good night and sweet dreams. Take care. See you in dreamland while I was driving. She should have slept already. Didn't reply before. I wanted the last words to be friendly words, but then another torrent of egocentric messages mixed with anger arrived, barking to me about pushing on me by questioning. I will skip it, nothing factual, nothing fundamental. I just replied whatever. I tried to message, to call, to do it. Can't please you, as I was driving, which I've told her. I didn't reply her much later. I read it. One of her lines was like, "You think this baby is not your baby? Okay, never come back to me. One day this is really your baby. I will have left you already." And all this came out of nowhere. Not a topic or doubt from my lips. Only once on that day of her confession when I asked her, "Do you know who is the daddy?" Her answer was, "I don't know, sorry," and the confession started. This did not go and end like planned. I said bye and thanks before several times, friendly and honest, so no need to repeat it again. I couldn't really eat nor sleep. In the early morning, I went on autopilot to block, disable, deactivate. She noticed my early morning activities, my changed profile photo, barked 2 or 3 lines of derogatory remarks. Then that channel was blocked, too. Silence. So silent for some days, honestly, rather more. I was a wreck and empty and tempted to plug in again. I resisted, knowing the outcome, and it couldn't be good and just get worse. Over the next days, there were more than 200 calls blocked. Stupid phone. If I block someone, do you really need to still tell me how many times Mrs. Block called? So chances are 50-50 the baby is mine. On the other hand, on my arrival day, I remember her breast felt somehow different in my hands, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Was it her being able to stay committed to our relationship? I mean, we had plans and dreams about lifelong together, family, kids, and had a list of names for them already. Was it about appetite for another affair? One not enough? Thrill of falling in new love again? Kink of some kind? Was it about LDR, not being available and around all the time? I know LDR is complicated. I've been on the other side of it, but we stayed so close all the time. Daily, several calls, short and long ones, messages, and sending each other selfies and pics of our daily lives. More details are following, not really chronologically. Her side, for good. I've been by her side, showed much patience and empathy towards her, and supported her emotionally on every problem that shook her work, family life, even when morning sickness kicked in and so on. I don't want to sound arrogant, but it's likely that there will only be 2 such men in her whole life with that kind of unconditional love. The second, her father. But on this one, I can't anymore. I can't again. I won't. Doormat no more. Roller coaster of cheating during that month before my arrival. She wrote to me twice, thrice, out of nothing. She doesn't want me anymore, and I shouldn't wait for her at the airport upon my arrival, just to forgive. Hours, her next morning, and reverse it, adding love declarations. Well, that time my flight was booked anyway, so if she wouldn't show up, I would be sure about it all and move on. It was hurting me to hear it and prepare my mindset with a thick skin to whatever the future will bring. Good to be prepared, but it hurts so much. It did hurt to feel our committed, serious relationship has a serious problem. By that time, her relationship status has changed from engaged to single already, as reconstructed in retrospect. I didn't invite her to the airport, and she knew my arrival already. Let's wait and see. Background of her writing to cancel would have been them being together. An example. After orgasm felt good, so they would triumph with their plans for their future and write to me and declare a breakup with me. Well, my gut feeling was telling me because of her changed syntax that some messages to me have been composed by him or by them together. It didn't match. As we messaged a lot, well, you know your partner quite well. Another day's background might have been to give me a reason for her silence and communication during her following meetup without disturbance, without her needing to reply or being callable. Reconstructed timing told me later, after her confession, that they met. Declarations of love. She repeatedly said during the last month she did choose me and many, many more deep declarations of commitments toward our relationship in the future. But I need to get to the ground to realize she was someone who wasn't ultimately choosing me. Words and actions are not the same. In the end, actions are louder than words. She did choose to open her heart and legs. I can't and I won't trust her words anymore. Dreams were modified. We had plans for our family and talked and planned and dreamed about it from time to time. I remember late in that month we talked once again about, in one of our blueprints for our future and living together was slightly modified. Small details were added, not much, but now, in the retrospective, I realize it was about to include a job for the other guy. It makes sense. His job matches, and coincidence is unlikely because of the timely match of these extras. And then, in that future, if I would have not been around all the time, then I don't need to explain my thoughts further, do I? What a planned dream for her. For them. I would call it a nightmare of planned and ongoing betrayal, and she sold it to me as our future. On the day of confession, she offered that in case I break up with her, we could still stay friends or keep in friendly contact like before, and that I still could visit her in the future even if I would be together with a new partner. In hindsight, I am thinking now this added to the modified dream might have been a hint to her wanting something open. One of her relatives tried to split us all the time, telling her stories about me and my race and putting thingies into her ear and into her heart. She kept visiting and listening to that relative every time after I caught her tears and needed to defend myself from the things that were told to her. He not stay with you. He not love you real. He only want to see you, you can have other. Use protection with him, you are too simple for him. Just a small selection. Once she kept strong, chose on my side, even blocked her and made pro-statements that commitment felt good. But she kept returning to that relative's social circle and poisoned influence again and again. Later on, hacking out of an everyday situation, she said something to me in a disrespectful way, commanding voice, rude. I rejected, friendly but firm. She anger erupted, argument about, you cannot treat me like that. I'm not a kid. Her. If you don't like it, you can leave. This and 2 more incidents within a few days, being close, being not LDR, my reserve was used up. I fell silent for a moment, took it as a faithful development, double-checked by double overthinking about insisting on respect and if it would be worth it. Didn't want to be degraded, to be submissive. Thanked inwardly about the good times we had together and began to pack my things to leave. First, she let me pack, playing ignoring me, maybe testing if I would cancel it. Then her apologies kicked in, and in a theatrical way she begged me to stay and to forgive her and hold on my legs softly, blocking my way to the door and so on. I gave in, stayed, and explained about what I won't accept regarding mutual respect. Business trip. During my stay, I left for a business trip for 2 days, but during my absence we exchanged lots of messages. Some calls, selfies as usual. After returning, I asked openly and friendly, how was yesterday and last evening gone? Somewhere? Dinner? SLF? Friend/supermarket? No. I asked several times and also hinted to her that I knew she was not at home in a way that would have made it very easy for her to admit whatever/wherever it was. Not a confrontation. She insisted on being home that night, but she wasn't. A neighbor I rarely meet or talk with confirmed to me not at home. Where has she been? I didn't ask again and I don't know until now. Somewhere, and she slept there too. My evolving gut feeling didn't fire up more than about the obvious unknown whereabout that night. Not a smallest bit about a night of love or fling. Remains mystery. But who knows how good she got at hiding and lying. Think positive and expect the worst. She sent me bears regularly, but in retrospect I remember my gut feeling telling me on one from that month her outer crap looked well supplied with blood. Excited, either she had sex or yes they had, and she took that photo shortly after and sent it to me. Confirmed in hindsight. Abort? How about an abort? She is pro-life. I knew and I am too. We undoubtedly wanted kids. Maybe that's not clever, but that's clever for the upcoming existence of a new life, someone discovering their existence in this earth. However, once she threatened me about them jumping off the building as an escape, she never opened the topic to abort and I didn't either. Again, her choice and zero pressure from my side. Resume. The damage has been done. The seed has been planted. There is no way to turn back time. There is no way to unbreak the trust and dreams. It is not possible to undo or un-F. There are some gaps in my story. Sorry about that. It would be just too much and too detailed, plus personal. Sometimes I think I would be better off if I could remember just half of what my senses captured and my brain remembers. That would reduce hurt and headache to less than half. Some gaps may contain things I did not do well as well, but I know these can live well with them, and I can assure they are not massive. Roller coaster is still running again from time to time. I can't deny it, even if it would sound more manly to state how much I don't care and that I never have a thought again. Example. Seeing a toddler, even in a movie, can trigger it in me. My thoughts about what happened to me and her are extensive. I am reflecting on my side, her side, his side. Additionally, my thoughts are also trying to figure the far future, the far outcome, far like years, what might happen and how it might develop much later again, all sides for main actors and add friends and family and future partners. Thanks for listening to my story, in my vent. I didn't mean to type that much, but my thoughts and memories yelled to get out of me. Seeking advice on how to proceed, history and future. Feedback, comments, and enlightenments are welcome. 2. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My sister tries to help my unfaithful wife in forcing me to pay child support for the baby that's not mine. I, 33M, recently discovered that my 6-month-old baby isn't actually mine. This whole situation has been a nightmare, and now my sister is getting involved too. I'll try to explain everything that happened in detail. I met my wife, Sadie, 31F, about 5 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday party. We hit it off right away and started dating soon after. Things moved pretty quickly between us. Within a year, we had moved in together and were talking about marriage. Sadie was funny, smart, and we had great chemistry. I really thought I had found the one. Our early relationship was filled with fun dates, deep conversations, and a growing sense of partnership. We shared similar values and goals, which made it easy to see a future together. We both wanted children eventually and talked about how we'd raise them. Looking back, it all seems so foolish now. We got married 3 years ago in a small ceremony with close family and friends. The first couple of years of marriage were good overall. We both had busy careers but made time for each other. We traveled to new places, tried out all the trendy restaurants in our city, and spent time with our friends. It was the normal, happy couple stuff you'd expect. About 1.5 years ago, we decided we were ready to start a family. We had settled into our careers, bought a house, and felt financially stable enough for kids. Sadie got pregnant pretty quickly, which we were thrilled about. I was over the moon excited to become a dad. I went all in on the expectant father role. I attended every doctor's appointment, read all the parenting books, and helped decorate the nursery. I even took a few weeks off work when Sadie had terrible morning sickness early on. I wanted to be there for every moment of the pregnancy. Our son was born 6 months ago, and at the time, I thought it was the happiest day of my life. Holding him for the first time, I felt overwhelmed with love. I couldn't wait to watch him grow up and be the best dad I could be. If only I had known the truth then. Looking back now, there were some red flags I ignored throughout our relationship and marriage. Sadie started acting distant and secretive with her phone about 1 year into our marriage. She'd get defensive if I asked who she was texting or quickly hide her screen when I walked into the room. She also started going out with work friends more often, sometimes not coming home until very late. There were a few times she didn't come home at all, claiming she crashed at a friend's place after too many drinks. But I trusted her and didn't want to be the jealous, controlling husband. I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. When our son was born, I noticed he didn't really look like me. His hair and eye color were different from mine, and his facial features didn't resemble me at all. But I knew babies often don't look like their parents right away, so I tried not to worry about it. I told myself he'd grow into my features eventually. As the months went on, though, I started having serious doubts. The timing of the pregnancy, Sadie's secretive behavior, our son not resembling me at all. It was adding up to something I didn't want to face. I found myself staring at my son, trying to find any hint of myself in his face, but there was nothing. I know it was wrong, but I ended up hacking into Sadie's phone while she was sleeping. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, and I needed to know the truth. What I found confirmed my worst fears and then some. There were messages going back over 2 years between Sadie and her ex-boyfriend, Tom. Explicit photos, plans to meet up at hotels, declarations of love. They had been having an on and off affair for most of our marriage. There were even messages from around the time our son was conceived where they discussed the possibility of him being the father. I felt physically ill reading through their conversations. The level of deception was staggering. They had been laughing at me behind my back, mocking how clueless I was. There were messages about how Sadie would make excuses to me so she could go meet Tom. It was clear this wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was a long-term, intentional betrayal. I confronted Sadie with what I had found the next morning. At first, she tried to deny it, claiming I was misunderstanding things or that her phone had been hacked. But when I showed her specific messages, she broke down and admitted everything. She confessed to the affair with Tom, saying it had started as closure for their old relationship but turned into something more. She wasn't sure who the father was when she got pregnant, but a DNA test after birth confirmed it was Tom. Apparently, Tom freaked out when he found out about the baby and wanted nothing to do with it. He blocked Sadie's number and moved out of state, so Sadie decided to pass our son off as mine. She claimed she was going to tell me eventually, but I don't believe her. She only confessed when confronted with irrefutable evidence. I was devastated. My whole marriage and fatherhood had been a lie. The past 5 years of my life felt like a complete sham. I told Sadie I wanted a divorce immediately. I also said I didn't want custody of or financial responsibility for a child that wasn't mine. Sadie begged me to reconsider, saying she still loved me and that I was the only father our son had ever known. She swore the affair was over and that she wanted to make things work, but I couldn't get past the betrayal. How could I ever trust her again after years of lies? This is where my sister, Bianca, 35F, comes into the story. Bianca and Sadie had become close friends over the years. When Sadie told her what happened, Bianca took her side. She said I was being cruel and selfish for abandoning my son, even if he wasn't biologically mine. She thinks I should stay and raise him as my own. Some background on my relationship with Bianca. We've never been close. Our parents always favored her growing up. She was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was constantly criticized. This led to a lot of bitterness between us. We're civil now as adults, but not close. Growing up, Bianca always got the best of everything. New clothes, the bigger bedroom, more attention from our parents. When she got in trouble, our parents would make excuses for her, but if I stepped out of line even slightly, I was punished harshly. This dynamic created a wedge between us that never really healed. I moved out of the house and started divorce proceedings. Sadie is fighting me on everything. She wants me to pay child support and have shared custody. I refuse to do either. This isn't my child, and I don't want to be financially responsible for him for the next 18 years. Bianca is furious with me over this. She's been comforting Sadie and letting her cry on her shoulder. Sadie has apparently been laying it on thick, talking about how she'll be poor as a single mom and how the baby will grow up without a father. I think she's manipulating Bianca, but Bianca is eating it up. Things came to a head when Bianca told me she was going to testify on Sadie's behalf in the divorce proceedings. She wants to paint me as an involved father who's now abandoning his child. Her goal is to get me to pay child support, at least even if I don't want custody. I was shocked that my own sister would side with my cheating ex-wife over me, but I guess I shouldn't have been surprised given our history. Still, it hurt to have my family turn against me like that. It felt like I was the scapegoat child all over again, with everyone taking Bianca's side. The divorce has been nasty. Sadie and Bianca have tried to drag my name through the mud. They've told our friends and family that I'm heartless for abandoning an innocent child. Some people have taken their side, saying DNA doesn't matter and I should step up as a father. They've painted me as a deadbeat dad who's walking out on his responsibilities. They easily leave out the part about Sadie's affair and the fact that the child isn't mine. It's been annoying to have my character attacked like this when I'm the victim of Sadie's cheating, but I've stood my ground. I don't believe I have any moral or legal obligation to support a child that resulted from my wife's affair. The courts ended up agreeing with me. Since there's proof the child isn't mine biologically, and I never acted as the father, he's only 6 months old. I'm not required to pay child support. The judge ruled that since I never knowingly took on a parental role, I'm not considered the legal father. Sadie's lies don't obligate me to 18 years of child support for a kid that isn't mine. It was a huge relief to have the law on my side. Sadie is devastated by the ruling. She truly thought she'd be able to force me to pay child support. I think she was counting on that money and now has to face the reality of being a single mother. Bianca is still supporting her and has offered to help out financially. They're both furious with me and saying I'll regret this decision, but I feel like I did the right thing. Why should I have to pay for my wife's infidelity? Why should I be financially responsible for another man's child? I was lied to and manipulated. I'm the victim here, not Sadie. I do feel bad for the baby. He's innocent in all this and didn't ask to be born into such a messed up situation. But I think it would be worse in the long run to try to raise a child I resent. Better to make a clean break now before he's old enough to remember me. Sadie can go after Tom for child support if she wants. Some of my friends think I did the right thing. They say Sadie made her bed and now has to lie in it. Others say I'm the a-hole for not stepping up as a father, regardless of DNA. They think I should put the child's needs first and be the bigger person. Bianca is still not speaking to me and says she wants nothing to do with me going forward. She thinks I'm selfish and immature for not manning up and raising this child. But I think she's naive and doesn't understand how painful this betrayal has been. The whole situation has torn my life apart. I've lost my wife, my home, the child I thought was mine, and now my sister. Some days I feel relieved to be free of Sadie's lies. Other days I miss the life I thought I had. I go back and forth between anger and sadness. I'm trying to rebuild my life now. I've started therapy to deal with the trauma of this betrayal. I'm focusing on my career and spending time with the friends who have stood by me, but it's hard not to feel bitter about everything I've lost. So, Reddit, should I have stayed and raised a child that wasn't mine, or was I right to leave and refuse financial support? This whole situation has been a nightmare, and I'm second-guessing everything. I could use some outside perspectives on whether I made the right choice. Update. It's been 6 months since my divorce was finalized. A lot has happened in that time, and I wanted to give an update on the situation. First, some background on what's been going on with me after the divorce. I focused on healing and rebuilding my life. I continued with therapy, which has been really helpful in processing everything. I threw myself into work and picked up some new hobbies to keep busy. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. I haven't had any contact with Sadie since the divorce was finalized. As far as I know, she's still struggling as a single mom. I heard through mutual friends that she tried to track down her ex, Tom, for child support but hasn't had any luck. Part of me feels bad for the situation she's in, but I remind myself that it's entirely of her own making. Bianca and I remained estranged after everything that happened. She was furious that I wouldn't help Sadie financially and cut off all contact with me. Our parents tried to mediate at first but eventually gave up when it was clear neither of us was willing to budge on our stance. Now here's where things get interesting. About a week ago, I got a call from my mother. She sounded stressed and said she had something important to tell me. Apparently, Bianca is now going through a very similar situation to what happened with me and Sadie. According to my mother, Bianca had been having an affair with a coworker for the past year. She ended up getting pregnant but tried to pass the baby off as her husband's. Her husband, Jack, recently found out about the affair and that the baby isn't his. He's devastated and wants a divorce. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. After everything Bianca said to me about stepping up and being a father regardless of biology, she's now in the exact same position Sadie was in. It's like karma came back around. My mother called because she wanted to warn me that Jack might reach out. She said that if he did, I should scold him and tell him to stay with Bianca for the sake of the baby. She thinks Jack should forgive Bianca and raise the child as his own, just like she thought I should have done with Sadie's baby. I was shocked by my mother's request. It seemed incredibly hypocritical to me. When I was going through my divorce, my family criticized me for not staying. Now they want me to tell Jack to do what I refused to do. It didn't sit right with me at all. Sure enough, Jack called me the next day. He was clearly distraught and said he didn't know who else to turn to. He explained the situation from his perspective. Bianca had been distant and secretive for months. He found suspicious text messages on her phone and confronted her. She eventually admitted to the affair and that the baby wasn't his. Jack said he felt betrayed and couldn't imagine staying in the marriage. He didn't think he could ever trust Bianca again after such a huge deception, but he was getting pressure from Bianca and both of their families to work things out for the baby's sake. Then Jack asked if I would be willing to testify on his behalf if the divorce went to court. He wanted me to share my experience and explain why I chose not to stay and raise Sadie's baby. He thought it might help the judge understand his perspective. I had a big decision to make. On one hand, my mother had explicitly asked me not to help Jack. Getting involved would likely damage my already strained relationship with my family even further. But on the other hand, I knew exactly what Jack was going through. I remembered how alone and judged I felt during my own divorce. In the end, I decided to help Jack. I agreed to testify if needed and offered to be a source of support as he went through the divorce process. I couldn't, in good conscience, tell him to stay in a marriage built on lies, knowing how painful that would be. I told Jack about my own experience. The betrayal, the pressure to stay, the difficult decision to leave. I explained how, even though it was hard, I ultimately felt I made the right choice for myself. I didn't tell him what to do, but I wanted him to know he wasn't alone in feeling the way he did. As I expected, my family was furious when they found out I was helping Jack. Bianca called me in tears, saying I was ruining her life. My parents said I was being selfish and cruel. They accused me of only helping Jack out of spite and bitterness over my own divorce. But I stand by my decision. I don't think anyone should be guilted into raising a child that isn't theirs, especially when the child is the product of their partner's affair. Jack deserves to make his own choice, just like I did, and he deserves support, not judgment, as he goes through this difficult time. It's been eye-opening to see how differently my family is reacting now that Bianca is the one who cheated. When it was me going through the divorce, they thought I should just get over it and step up as a father. Now that it's their golden child in trouble, they're bending over backwards to defend her actions and preserve her marriage. I don't take any pleasure in Bianca's situation. Infidelity and divorce are painful for everyone involved. But I do hope this experience gives her some perspective on what I went through. Maybe she'll understand now why I made the choices I did. As for me, I'm going to continue to support Jack as he goes through this process. I know from experience how isolating divorce can be, especially when everyone is pressuring you to forgive and stay. If I can make things even a little bit easier for him, I want to do that. I don't regret my decision to help Jack, even though it's caused more family drama. I believe I'm doing the right thing by standing up for what I think is right, even when it's difficult. Hopefully, in time, my family will understand my perspective, but even if they don't, I can sleep at night knowing I followed my conscience. So what do you think, Reddit? Am I the a-hole for going against my family's wishes and helping Jack? Or did I do the right thing by supporting someone going through a similar situation to what I experienced? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.